Well, all right, everyone. Thank you all for being here today. My name is Anthony Barokas. I am here for the BirdDog live session number 10. And I appreciate everyone tuning into these shows to learn more about BirdDog and the technologies we are bringing to the show. Anyone, as always, I love to know where everyone is watching from. And we're going to have lots of detailed information. So if you have any questions at any time, feel free to post them in the comments. So as always, don't forget, I'm moving my cursor over to it, you can scan and win 1 year BirdDog Connection subscription, 1 year. And this works around the world. So it's a whole suite of tools now. It's not just cloud, it's Connect. So there's a whole suite of tools that you can get for a year with a 1 year BirdDog Connect subscription. And this will be given away at the end of today's live show. So if you're watching this after the fact, don't go to sign and try and fill out the form, because it's not live. You have to be here during the live shows in order to be able to win this 1 year BirdDog Connect subscription. So you can either type in bit.ly/BD entry for BirdDog entry, or you can shoot your phone camera at this little QR code and it'll take you to a form to fill out. Give us your name, your email, give us your email again because you probably typed it in wrong, and that will enter you to win. And at the end, I'll gather up all those entries. People who have entered during the show, we'll put them into a wheel of, wheel of names, and that will determine our winner for today's show. So be sure to fill that out during the show. So let me get rid of that. And first up in the news is BirdDog is exhibiting with NDI at Infocom. So if you are going to Infocom, it's going to be at booth 3870. If I can do this, booth 3870. And there's new firmware coming up for the X4 Ultra, the 4K SDI, the 4K HDMI. So stay tuned. New firmwares are on the way for those things. So, and if you haven't already had a chance to see the Mach-E Live in the Mach-E Studio, well, first of all, you should just go back and look at the last 2 shows that we did here. And also, CJ himself, who is our special guest star today's show, has released a whole litany of videos. I hope I'm not embarrassing him. A whole litany of videos showing you all about the new Mach-E Live and Mach-E Studio. So I encourage you to check those out on the YouTube channel because we are broadcasting live to both Facebook and YouTube. So if you haven't seen them already, go to the BirdDog channel on YouTube to check those out. And then also, you can get, there's more bundles. The bundles, you can get more stuff in an easier way to travel them. You can take your live production setup to the next level with BirdDog's latest camera bundles and combos. Each kit includes 3 PTZ cameras and the powerful keyboard controller with them. And with the X1 and X1 Ultra, there's also the protective custom case that carries the cameras and the keyboard and just keeps it all together. Now, it's not an ATA case. I wouldn't be throwing this on an airplane and have it fall. It's great for putting it in the back of your car. It just keeps the cameras all together, nice and protected in one big unit, but it's not like an international, secure, waterproof, ATA case. So just understand that. Let's see what else we got. You can choose your level. First, you get the X1 bundle. You can start strong with 3 X1s and full control for $4,085 US. The X1 Ultra bundle, you can upgrade to 4K with onboard monitoring, meaning the monitor feed comes back, for $5,085 US. The X4 Ultra combo is pro-grade performance for $6,585 US. And then the X5 Ultra combo, it's not going to scroll for me, is broadcast ready for $89.85. Now, there's a lot to cover here today, so I'm going to dive right into the details, and at any time, feel free to use the comments to throw us a question. This is a live show, and this is where you get to get your questions answered, not your answers questioned. So use the comments to ask me anything that pops into your head as I help you conquer BirdDog's decoders. First up is the BirdDog Play. The BirdDog Play is the least expensive NDI decoder at just $150 US. So if you have a display with an HDMI input, you basically have an NDI workstation. The BirdDog Play redefines simple by delivering powerful 4K video playback in a compact, plug-and-play design. It delivers NDI high bandwidth or NDI HX3 with support up to 4K P60. You connect the Ethernet and the HDMI, and then you can even use your TV remote, as long as you've got CEC support over the HDMI, to select the NDI source through the TV. So you can stream anywhere via SRT or BirdDog Cloud, delivering global connectivity, and the 3.5 millimeter audio output ensures that your sound will be as sharp as the visuals. You can mount it discreetly with a built-in magnet or secure it with its non-slip grip ring. It has USB-C power for maximum flexibility and offers smart integrations like a RESTful API, Crestron, Zoom support, and QSYS API support for seamless control. So to transform your HDMI display into a powerful NDI workstation, you can use the BirdDog Play, where high performance meets effortless usability. Now, before I get into the bigger and more complex tools, let me bring on our guest, CJ Farrell, who I'm basically going to call the expert in all things BirdDog at this point. Should I do that?
You can if you like. How's it going, Anthony?
I will definitely do that.
Good to be here.
I appreciate you being here. And again, for everyone who doesn't know, CJ is waking up at the crack of dawn. Probably the sun hasn't even come up where you are yet, right?
Not quite. Still a little bit black outside.
So he is helping us to broadcast this show so that we can reach both the European, the U.S., and I guess some early risers over in the Asian world as well.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I'm over here in Melbourne, Australia, but it's good to be on these shows, and definitely wakes you up to be here. But thanks for having me on again.
So next, let's talk about the BirdDog 4K family of converters.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. So we've been working. The 4K family converters has been around for a bit. Since I've kind of come onto the product management scene, we've done a lot of work with them. And hopefully if people have seen, we've also released a lot of updates. But they are very powerful boxes. And the feature set that they were at launch was some people not kind of up to standard of what they wanted or what was promised, I guess. And so it's kind of been our mission to bring it up to what people expected and what they want out of the boxes.
Yes, and I think there's been a lot of advancements. If people saw the banner that was playing during the pre-show, announcing that the 2x2s and even the 4-input, now has, I believe we're really delivering on the advertised capability of those units.
Yeah, so a big buzzword that was thrown around a lot from us was the Silicon 2. And so that was basically bringing on support of other protocols besides full NDI. And so with that, with the 4K HDMI and SDI, since NAB, we've been live with the HX support on those. So about 2 months now that the HX support's been live. So it's been good to see people using those now with their X series cameras, which, as people know, when we launched the X series cameras, we moved over to NDI HX. So now the BirdDog Play has supported NDI HX, and then our 4K HDMI and SDI also support HX or full bandwidth.
And I think technically that's even more than it was originally advertised, because HX was not part of the discussion initially when these came out.
Yeah, so for people that know BirdDog, it's always kind of hung its hat on the full NDI train. And so when we launched the 4K Pros, it was just full NDI. Our cameras were full NDI. But I think HX has really evolved over the years. And when we did all this, HX was in a much different place than where it is now, which is part of the reason why we did that path and why we've kind of changed courses a little bit. But we still support full NDI in basically all of our workflows. It's just that with NDI HX3, we've noticed that the latency is a lot better, the compression's a lot better. And so we've been able to step into that. And we also have a a nice article on our website that kind of explains some of the differences on NDI full versus HX3. And so if you are a little bit confused about all these acronyms, give that a look up on our website. And that explains it very well, some of the differences of those.
Okay, so do you want to go through the different converters and talk about them? Do you want me to do that? How should we do this?
Yeah, if you want to tee up the one you want to talk about, and then I'll kind of go into where we're at and where we're going, if that makes the most sense. We can start with BirdDog Play if you'd like. That's kind of the entry level decoder, I think, for most people now.
Right. Well, I talked about the play. Is there what more can we add about the play? In I mean, do you have one there to show? Because I think one of the coolest things is this. It's just such a small device.
Yeah, no, it is a very small device. It's basically our entry level decoder for price point, so $150 US. And it really is kind of taking the Apple TV approach for NDI. And we've continued to update on top of it. I think right now it's in a very nice spot where it'll do NDI HX. It'll work with any of the X series cameras. We released an update for it about 2 months ago as well that improved some NDI HX capabilities. And we are still going to be bringing some updates in the near future, probably the next month, to have some more features with our BirdDog Connect software as well. And so soon you will, and it's kind of a sneak peek, but you'll be having a BirdDog Connect panel within Play. And so you'll actually be able to connect straight to Play, which will be a nice feature. And so you'll be able to set up Play as a receiver box and connect it directly to our software. And then when that Play turns on, you can then route the signal to it wherever it is in the world.
So like I was saying at the beginning, somebody could select an input with the a TV that handles CEC. They could pick an input, so they can pick it at the receiving end. And now you're saying you could actually pick it at the sending end.
Yeah, so basically at either end that you're at, you can now orchestrate it. And with BirdDog Connect, you could be anywhere, and then you can orchestrate what signals go to it. You can also group up a bunch of plays. So if you had, let's say 6 plays in a building, you could actually just create a group of that on Connect, and then basically be able to send one NDI source straight to those 6 plays with basically 2 clicks. So there's going to be a lot of orchestration coming out with that, but that's where the play is headed right now as its next firmware update.
I think that really speaks well for churches and corporate and places where the play really would be deployed is sort of like just throw them out there for a bunch of TVs, and now being able to like group them together and say, okay, all of the TVs are now going to be showing this feed as opposed to that feed.
Yeah, so I think a lot of people, for the most part, they're going to stick it to whatever program switcher they have and go through like a video playlist. But it is nice if they want to be able to switch that, in a different place than everyone, and maybe just have like a separate, if they're doing any type of video feeds, they want to control that separate from the production and not have them worry about it, because that's just what's going on in the building. So it's really nice to be able to have that flexibility to control it from your program switcher or give it into the hands of someone else that you want.
All right. So after the BirdDog play, what's the next one we come to? It's what do you call it? The 1x1, the 2x2?
So we have a couple of different options there. The next basically in line that we have that we're still actually going through is the BirdDog Mini. But that one's kind of it's been around for a while. That's our encoder decoder. So that one is basically, you can choose it as an HDMI encoder or an HDMI decoder. And right now, since it is an older device, it is limited to 1080p 60. But it is still a nice device, and we will be coming up with another kind of quality of life to bring it up to the NDI 6 library. So that will be coming, as well as like some of the Bird UIs in about a month from now. So we do have that scoped as well to bring an update to the Mini as well.
Okay. And then we get up to the multi-channel ones.
Yeah, so then it's kind of the 4K Pro family, which is the one that we've been doing a lot of work on.
Do you want to share a slide?
Yeah, so I'll see which one works best. I was, if I share my screen, give me a second. I just wanted to make sure that the everything was the correct orientation here. I got a little nervous. So I have this. Let's see if I share my screen. You tell me what this looks like. Entire screen.
That's
all right.
it, huh?
Can you see that screen?
Add to scene. There we go.
So this is just real quickly a look at where we were basically about a year ago when we brought these out. So a big mode that we brought, just to kind of cover from the bases, is we essentially made these 4K HDMI and SDI boxes into 2-channel boxes. So a lot of people knew these as you choose it to be an encoder or a decoder. And then we actually added the ability to go single encode or dual encode. And what was powerful about that is you could then use those HDMI and SDI ports in a different way than maybe you thought they were going to be used for. So with single encode, you could bring in an HDMI signal and encode it into full NDI. And then in dual encode, you could bring in the HDMI, and then that SDI port became an input as well. So we have like this kind of reference page on our website. And this was a big update that we came out with, like I said, about last year. And has been going forward. And then the big update that we released in April was with that HX support. And I'll show now in a second as well what we did for that. So when we went to the HX support, let me stop this. Sorry, 1 second.
No worries. And I think after we show this, we got a couple questions coming in. And again, a reminder, everyone, if you've got questions while we go through this, throw them into the comments, because the comments are live. We're both here. And if the whole point of you being here live is the fact that we can answer your question. So do throw them in.
All right. So now if you want to flip back over to that. So this is kind of where the new update takes us. And so with this, we actually launched on the 4K HDMI and SDI, we have essentially 5 different operation modes. And so it gets a little bit overwhelming, but we've kind of are coming out. The website will be refreshing soon as well to have some references like this. But essentially, we can talk about the 5 modes, which starting with that is now our single channel encode, or what we're calling HB HX encode. So that's high bandwidth or full NDI, and then HX encode. And so what you would do with this is you'd bring in some type of video camera into the HDMI or SDI input. And then the unique part is in the device, you'll not only have access to the full NDI encoded signal, but also the HX signal. So if you were to bring it up on Studio Monitor or something like that, you would actually see 2 different inputs coming in. So you have access to that full NDI, maybe if you want to bring that into a production switcher, and then the HX, if you want to maybe send that to another decoder somewhere in the room. It kind of gives you flexibility to take that camera input and be able to use it in full NDI or NDI HX. And the neat thing is, in addition to that, the loop out of the device, whatever that third port is, still works. So if you bring in that camera, you're not only going to get an NDI HX and a full NDI encode, you're also going to get the video loop out as well.
Nice.
And so that's just with the HB HX encode. And then moving to the top right, we have what we're calling now HB HX decode, which in translation, this is essentially also what Play is doing, except this is going to do it at 4K 60 resolutions all the way through. So the Play with full NDI, you're limited to 1080p 60, and then HX you can do 4K 60. With the 4K Pro converters, you're not really limited to any type of bandwidth restriction, and you can do 4K 60 all the way through. So on the left there, you'll see either NDI HX3, HX2, or high bandwidth signal, and whatever you choose, the decoder is going to output that out of both outputs. So whether it's the SDI or HDMI, you're actually going to get an HDMI output of the signal and an SDI output of the signal, which is pretty nice. So you could go to like a big screen TV, and then you could maybe go to like an SDI monitor or a production switcher if you wanted to.
Right, right.
So that's the HB-HX decode mode. And then moving down, we basically have what I showed earlier on that darker slide, and that is the dual high bandwidth encode. So this mode's still here. You can bring in something like a laptop into the HDMI input, and then you can actually bring something like an SDI video camera into the SDI input. And then you'll still get that HDMI output of the laptop as a loop out. So this is now having that laptop feed available on your network as a source, and then the SDI camera as a NDI feed on your network. So that's the dual HB encode. And then the dual HB decode is basically I can have 2 different NDI streams go out of the HDMI output, and then the SDI output. So these can be independent. They don't have to be the same thing. So if I wanted a program feed going to an HDMI monitor and maybe an ISO camera going to an SDI monitor, with this dual HB workflow, I can basically do that. So that's kind of how that mode works. And then the kind of sleeper one that we actually did was the 1x1 mode. And we'll talk about this in a second with the quad and the OG4. But essentially, we did this where the HDMI or the SDI output on the device. So if you have a 4K HDMI, you can now actually go in to the HDMI input with a camera, and then you can go out with another NDI source, right? So this is a very powerful thing if you want to use this, maybe let's say in a live production and have this sitting by someone's camera, and then you want to send them the program feed that you're doing, let's say on your TriCast or your vMix or whatever switcher you're using that does an NDI output.
Right.
You can output that over the network and then view that on an SDI monitor where that camera guy is sitting. So this kind of is the full workflow. And this was a long talked about feature from us that we went quite a bit about, but then we're able to launch it with this, this HX update that we came out with in April. So this right now is available on both the 4K HDMI and the SDI. And like I said, with kind of these workflow pictures, we'll be redesigning the website in the next week or so. And you'll be able to have access to kind of see just examples of what those devices can do.
Yeah, I think the functionality is one of those things. It takes a minute to wrap your head around it because you know what you want to do, but you don't know like what it's called or like how what the flow is. It takes a little bit to like really figure out. But I think once people get the flexibility that these things are really going to be offering, they're going to be like oh wait, I can do that too.
Yeah, no, it's really cool because a lot of people have dead set on what they wanted, or they thought maybe they could only do one channel and they needed to buy another box. And so really it's nice that for the same price point now you can get that second channel available on your network. So it really has kind of become a powerful way to use these decoders, and it kind of goes back to what like the BirdDog Studio was, which was a Swiss Army knife. Right. Is what I used to call it and what I used it for back in the day when I did live productions. And so I think with these now 5 different operation modes, it really brings these devices back into that kind of Swiss Army knife vibe, which is what we were kind of going for.
Now you mentioned the studio, and I point that out only because a question came in. Any hope in updates for the studios?
That's a good question. So with the studio, unfortunately we pretty much maxed out what it can do. And believe me when I say we did try to go up to different things, different features. We tried 1x1. We tried going up to like the NDI5 library, and a lot of them were basically, fortunately, limitations of the chipset itself. So the hardware side. So with the studio, it's kind of stuck where it is. And then we also had the unfortunate part of not being able to produce them anymore because we couldn't buy the chip anymore. So with the studio, we did do our due diligence to try to update it to those things. But unfortunately, because it's a different chipset and a little bit older, that was, since, kind of we couldn't get it anymore. There was only so much we could do to bring the studio. So right now where the studio is kind of where it's gonna stay.
And I did see an announcement come out that it's basically because of the inability to get new chips. It's basically end of life at this point.
Yeah, so it was definitely chipset related. We couldn't order basically the core chip that went inside, and so that's what led to the end of life for it.
All right. Well, again, thank you for the questions. And if anybody has a question during the show, again, just remember that if you feel free to just put your questions in the comments at any time. We'll do our best to answer them, or I'll just throw it at him and he'll answer it. And I'll just be like,
Yeah, just nod and wave, right? Is that what they say?
I'll do my best at nodding, yes.
Yeah, no worries. So that's kind of where the 4K HDMI and SDR are sitting. And we actually do have another update coming for them basically in the next calendar week. Which is, I think, one of the newsletter announcements. So we will be having a firmware update coming that you'll just drop into the web UI. I know a lot of people, we had USB updates to get onto this HX platform, which is kind of a headache. But hopefully with this last round, it seems like it was a much quicker process than when we went up to NDI 5 last year. So for those users that I've worked with, this one's just going to be a nice drag and drop. It's going to take you about a minute. So it's going to be nice, but it'll have more support for third-party NDI HX sources, which we've been working on a lot. So we obviously tested with the X series cameras as kind of our benchmark of what we needed these to work with. But then we also kind of found out that, people in the industry, when they're using NDI HX, it kind of was a little open to interpretation to how that was going to work. And so what we found was a lot of different NDI sources and cameras will use whatever they want in terms of the NDI HX. And so we had to be a little bit more lenient on what our 4K converter accepts. And so with the 4K Pro converters, they were very particular. It had to be the right frame rate. It had to be the right resolution. And if the metadata, which is like the information in the signal, is different than the actual video source, our 4K HDMI and SDI boxes basically would say, you're lying to me, and we're not going to decode this, or we're not going to do this. And so we had to kind of go back and test with a lot of different sources, and we saw so many different results over different apps from different vendors. But we basically put as much compatibility as we could in this next update that will be coming out in a week for the 4K HDMI and SDI. So that is coming, but just to touch on that. And then moving towards the other big question one is the Quad and the OG4. So these are our 4-channel devices. And so these are 4 12G SDI inputs and outputs. And this is kind of the update that we had last year as well, which is basically adding in the 2x2 mode, which, as you can kind of maybe figure out by patterns, we had the 1x1 mode, and this is the 2x2 mode. And this was the best way that we were kind of able to name it, in our opinion, to kind of escape some of the confusing wording that different companies will use when they say like bidirectional or simultaneous. If they say bidirectional, they could mean, yeah, it can go both ways, but not at the same time. You choose which way you want to go. And so for us, we kind of said, all right, let's just go 2 in, 2 out. We'll call it 2x2, or 1 in, 1 out. We'll call it 1x1. So with the quad, go ahead.
Just to interrupt, can you do a 3x1 then?
So currently, no. That is a good question. So we went down that rabbit hole as well. But in order to just kind of get this one stable, 2x2 was the best route for the box. So the first 2 inputs are always essentially encodes. So the channels 1 and 2 on the device are encodes. Channels 3 and 4 are always decodes. So with that 2x2 right now where it sits, it is set up like that. We do have scoped the 3x1 and 1x3 or whatever you want to call it. But for most of the customers that we talk to, and if you guys disagree with me, please, give me a comment or give me an email at cj@birddog.tv. But for most of the people we talk to, 2x2 is what they were looking for. But we are still keeping our ears open to maybe looking at 3x1 and 1x3. But the next thing that we'll be looking at is the HX support on these devices, which is what we're currently working on live.
Wow, that will be very, very exciting, I think, with HX support on the quads.
Yeah. So with currently, just to wrap up what it's doing right now, it's either 4 decodes, so 4 different sources. They can be independent resolutions. So you can have a 4K one, a 1080 one, which is nice because people might have different resolutions for what they're trying to do. Then the 4 encodes, so whatever encodes you bring into the device, that'll work for that. And then 2x2 is, like I said, 2 in and 2 out, and that is happening at the same time. So it's not you're choosing, one way or the other. This is now a bi-directional box. But yeah, so the next update we are working for is bringing HX support onto these. My hope right now is to have a beta at the end of the month. So once again, if you guys are interested in the beta, I do talk to a decent amount of people on our Facebook user group and over email. But yeah, if you're interested in that, feel free to reach out to me on one of those channels.
All right. Well, we had a question come in right on this. So what doesn't work on the quad now? Is everything resolved? HDMI out, SFP, etc.?
So right now on the quad, like I said, if you look at the scope, HX is the thing that we're working on right now. SFP Plus is functional. That is functional on all the boxes, all the devices. The one thing that we've noted, and we have this like on our knowledge user base, which is important, is unfortunately it's not regular SFP. which means a 1 GB connection. And so that has tripped up a lot of people that I know of talking to, and I can move this down if you want. The 1 GB SFP will not work. It needs to be a 10 GB SFP plus cage to
You
work
mean
with
gigabit?
this. Gigabit, sorry. Yes. Gigabit to work with this. So it needs to be a 10 gig. If it's 1 gig, it's not going to recognize, and you're going to think it's broken. So the 1 gig is for that RJ45, and then 10 gig is for the SFP plus. The HDMI port still does not work on the quad, and that is for, we basically traded off disabling that in order to make it work properly up to 4K across all resolutions. So with encode, which is the most strenuous thing for the device, when we go into the 4K mode, we're pretty much hitting at like 90% capacity of the device, and we need to have some headroom. And when we add in that HDMI output, we basically hit the max. And so we had to basically disable that from functioning. So the HDMI port on the quad, unfortunately, still does not work. We are looking at maybe activating it in like a 2x2 mode, or as you referenced to, maybe a 1x3 or 3x1. But right now it is still deactivated.
I know Aja with their IO 4K, they have 4 SDIs and they have HDMIs, and you get 4 channels, and you can pick, okay, I want to use HDMI for this path, which means I'm giving up an SDI path. You know, it's like you only get so many things. I don't get to use all the ports on the device, but I get 4 paths, you know.
Yes. Yeah, they have it very much configurable for that. And unfortunately, the way like the hardware is, it is a dedicated loop out, the way it's routed. So unfortunately, on that quad unit, we don't have the ability to control it as an individual path, like you said, like the AJA ones do. So it is a physical loop out for it. So we're kind of, your hands are tied in terms of what it can do, unfortunately, on that one. So
another really good question came in, and based on what you just said, you talked about the fact that out in the world, the interpretation of the NDI standards, and I know I've seen bird dogs that say NDI certified, but the question comes in, will BirdDog pursue NDI certification for its converters and other products?
That is a great question. Yes, so we are in the process of starting up the certification with those. We had to get the HX support working for it in order to start that process. And with this quality of life update that I just mentioned for the 4K HDMI and SDI, that was basically geared at getting towards the certification process. So they do have our units, and we're working on getting this quality of life update to them. And then we will go to the certification process and try to get those 4K HDMI and SDI units to be NDI certified. So yes, that is a big deal to us, as I think the whole camera line now is NDI HX certified. So the converters are on that next path.
Now, just to be clear, the fact that a BirdDog device is NDI certified doesn't mean the other device is NDI certified. Because like you said, if it's sending out a header that says 1080p, but the video is 4K,
yep. Yeah, and that was a big part of like the NDI certified program, because yeah, like I alluded to earlier, everyone basically took HX2 and said, I'm just going to do what I can with it, because they were all just using their H.264 encoders on the device and saying it's kind of a black box and let's let it rip. So basically the certification process was a way to kind of tighten that down and make sure that you're in line with the settings that it should be, which if you're certified, then you are lined up to be compatible with everything. So this update that we've been working on, like I said, is making it more compatible with everything and being more lenient towards maybe accepting those things that aren't certified as well.
But I think it comes down to say that if this side is NDI certified, but this side is not, you kind of need to have NDI certified on both ends to ensure compatibility.
Yeah, if you want to be 100% sure, you do need to do that. Obviously, the NDI group is a very, like, in my opinion, like very live production based, which anyone in live production, I like to think of ourselves as like we're the doers, the people in the grass, right? The guys who are in the weeds plugging things in. And so a lot of people have come from trial and error of trying to figure out, oh, this works with X, X and Y, and maybe, this product doesn't work with anything. And so I think that's been a long journey as NDI has been out over the past, what are we at now, like 7-8 years. But I think now with the certification process, it's in a nice spot to be able to point and say, cool, this is going to work.
All right, another question comes in. Will we see HDCP added to 4K HDMI?
Hey, Tom, how's it going? HDCP, so that's going to be up to NDI, unfortunately. So right now we are limited to the protocol itself. And so the protocol does not support HDCP. So we're kind of waiting to see. I know NDI has been teasing stuff about their Infocom show. Like the other day they had some like fill in the blank thing, and I think the second letter was D, and it was 4 letters. So people were guessing. So your guess is as good as mine there. But right now it's basically waiting for NDI themselves to be able to support it. Once they do that, then we will be able to adapt that.
And to follow up on HDCP, what is the sense of Dante audio for embed and debed?
So right now with Dante Audio, I know that was a big, long announced thing, like on the flexes. And what it came down to, at least when we were working on trying to get those added, was basically we ended up finding like the chipset couldn't do it to how we wanted it to. And so it was kind of a sad reality for a lot of the products trying to get that implemented. And as we've been talking with our engineers, they will tell us, oh yeah, there's still a route we can do this, which I think is why messaging wise you might have heard like we haven't slammed the door on it. We just keep hitting closed doors when we're trying to implement this. So with the Dante Audio embed de-embed, we've done a lot of work right now with our Connect software to improve that. So if you are trying to get any type of Dante Audio, the Connect software does support bringing it in and out, as well as our Dante NDI Audio Bridge, which I know Tom uses. And we are working on updating that as well to make that better, or rebuilding it. So that is in the pipeline that we're working on. And then I guess as far as the Dante Audio for current devices, we are looking towards the future. I won't speak too much of it, but basically in our next device that we want to release encoder and decoder wise, Dante Audio is a key component to that product. And so that we're working on that for future releases right now.
You can call that the BirdDog encoder and just add another D for Dante. Bird.
Yeah, that'd be pretty good, or have it come out as capital or something.
All right, and then you mentioned the Flex devices. Wilton asks, why was RUDP left out of the Silicon 2 update for the Flex devices?
So that's a good question. Right now, when we had RUDP enabled, basically we had issues with the physical Ethernet component of the device. And so when we were doing it, we basically had to make a decision, because we could say it's RUDP, but if someone is going to be diligent and Wireshark it up, they're going to see that it's not actually a UDP signal. It's going to default to TCP. So with that said, we were kind of limited and couldn't get the RUDP support for it, which is why you don't see it on the Flex devices.
All right, and this one's interesting. Will there be an NDI Cross Converter?
So is that in terms of, I guess, resolutions they're talking about? Like,
I would guess like within the NDI realm, it comes in at 4K, but within NDI you convert it down to 1080.
Like scaling, or scaling, or
does it happen in Connect?
No. So right now Connect will basically take what it is given. Currently the only thing really doing any scaling right now is Play. Like Play will scale outputs just because it's a different chipset. So we are looking at having scaling be a part of the BirdDog future in terms of being able to force a resolution on encode that you have, or scale decode. So we are looking at that, Wilton, in future products. Right now with like the 4K Pro family, I don't think it's going to be coming to that. Play, we might be able to have some things, but we're basically looking for that I'll call it scaling feature. If you can correct me if that's not what you're looking for, but we are looking at being able to manipulate the resolution either on the encode or decode side.
And since you mentioned the play a couple times, this question seems apropos. Does the play support SRT decoding too?
It does, yes. So the play, when you go into the different modes it can do, there are essentially three choices. You can do NDI, and once again, that's NDI HX or full bandwidth. And then you can do SRT. So you can just do as a caller listener, standard SRT configuration. And then you can also add a BirdDog Connect source as well. And that's more for like directing it individually to your Connect software. Like I said, we're working on a next panel. So there'll be a new panel called Connect, and that's where you'll be able to set this play up as an independent destination and not have to worry about that configuration side.
All right. And then Golden T follows up. Thanks for the quad info. Why not have a 1080p mode in which everything was enabled so that many of us could who use it only for 1080p, if 4K is too much, and allow everything, like the HDMI, I guess the key point there.
Is this, like okay. Yeah. So this is for the HDMI output enabling that, I guess. That's a good question. I haven't really thought about that right now. In terms of limitations, we can look at that. Most of the processing though, so going from 1080p to 4K is definitely going to have a big effect on the bandwidth that you're using. But on the CPU side, the encode engine actually going from 4K to 1080 doesn't have quite that much of a dramatic effect. That's actually a good question. I'll ask that if there's a forced one. I haven't really thought about forcing it to that. But I'll have to follow up on that one, Golden T. If you want to, feel free to reach out on the Facebook user group if you're not in that, or send me an email at cj@birddog.tv, and I'll ask for that. Like I said, right now our focus on quad and OG4 is moving towards the HX support, and so for basically this month we're kind of trying to put the blinders on because there's always so many different features and things that come in, so sometimes it's hard to buckle down. So we're about to be putting our blinders on to try to get some of this HX support onto quad and OG4.
And I think, maybe this could be in the next one, but I think this raises a good point, because even though these are 4K devices and, 4K is awesome, there's a lot of people out there doing a lot of work, whether it be corporate, whether it be faith-based, whether it be, sports production. It's all 1080 because it's all going to be streamed at 1080. So there's no need for 4K. So we're using these devices at a little bit less of a demand. So, and I have said many times in my streams, it's like 4K is great if somebody's going to be looking at it on an 80-inch TV and they're sitting really close. But other than that audience, 4K does not, I feel, deliver the, experience much different than an HD on your phone, on a tablet, on a laptop or whatever. HD delivers, 99% of the same experience.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree on that side. I think we're moving towards where, more and more we're hearing that 4K, if it doesn't have 4K, why would I want it? And so we do get that feedback a lot, for better or worse, and not necessarily saying I agree with them or not. The one thing I will say, I know if we can do this thing that Golden T asked, as soon as we do it, people are going to complain and say, why isn't the 4K one working for the output? This is just me putting on my product manager hat, because I know that's going to be the first question I get as soon as that pops out. But
because 4K is harder.
Yeah, and you can tell them, sorry, I can't do it, and then you go down that rabbit hole again of, well, maybe what if we do 2 channels and it's 1080 only? Right. So it is a slippery slope a bit, but it is a good question on that one.
And I do want to put this out there in case people have joined us late. If you haven't already entered to win a BirdDog Connect subscription, I see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 people have entered already. Go to bit.ly/BirdDog entry. You can type that in yourself if you're watching on your device. bit.ly/BD entry for BirdDog entry. That's all you got to do. It'll get there. And you'll come up to a form, fill out the form. Or if you're watching this on a computer and you have a separate device, point your phone at the little QR code, and that'll take you to the same form, and then fill out the questions and enter to win a 1-year BirdDog Connect subscription. And I think this is better than Cloud, which is what we offered before, because Connect is more stuff.
It's more stuff, but it's also, I think one of the big things is it's better laid out in terms of claiming things from one side or the other. So, and there'll be a lot of video content. I know that Dan has been working on for Connect to come out, but it's basically like how we add devices or add remote contributors is a much more simplified process than like the previous way that Cloud did it through certain claim codes. So that's been a big part of it, is trying to just optimize that user experience for it.
All right. And let's see, I think we had a couple questions come in over here. And again, if you're here live, feel free to throw questions into the comments. Let's go next. Is there a way of, let me just go this way. Is there a way of using Play with SDI?
So not directly, but you can always use a converter. So they have the, not to like name, brand drop or anything. There's always the Blackmagic micro converters. With Play, it's not going to be affected by like level B, level A SDI, which that is one thing to note about our 4K Pro converters. A lot of people get tripped up sometimes because they use level A SDI, which is a one-way path. And then Blackmagic introduced something, I think they were the ones who did it, but something called level B SDI, which is a two-way path. And they did that so that they could shade and control their cameras over an SDI cable, which is really clever. The problem is no one else in the industry used SDI like that. And so it kind of really messed up a lot of things. And so if you've ever had issues getting an SDI signal into a Blackmagic, it's probably because of that level A, level B SDI thing. But so on a Play, you could go HDMI out into a converter and then convert it to SDI. So for about $50, you can then make your Play into an SDI box. Obviously, you just need a little power source. But that would be the most convenient way to make that Play an SDI decoder.
That's right. And then I think I got another question here. Looking for an NDI to SDI decode solution for around 4 to 8 NDI cameras from quite a distance away. What would you recommend?
It's kind of there's a little couple options there. Really depends. One of the main ways, if you wanted to just, if you want everything hard, yeah, you could do 2 quads for sure. As encode on one side and a decode on the other, and then you would basically connect the 2 over SFP plus. One thing I know you can do that I've seen users do is you can actually, a little bit less talked about, but I've seen users connect them directly to each other as well. So they'll connect the one quad directly to another quad as an encode decode without even using a network, which How
do you talk to them then?
They basically just talk to each other on the fallback IPs. So yeah, once you would set one up and then go plug it in to how you want it. But basically you're just crossing your fingers and hoping, but I've seen people have sent me pictures of them using it like it. And so that's one way. Or you just have the network on one side and then you'll just do SFP and then fiber to run that long distance. If it's a long distance with a lot of walls and a lot of, inaccessible ways to get there, that's kind of where we would turn to something like software with Connect. And so if you had a computer running Connect on one side where those like 4 cameras were, you could then have all of them come into the same network. And then if you have an internet connection, then you could transport them to the other long distance away receiver. It receives them as NDI, and then you could decode locally those NDI sources on your quad as if they were directly connected by a cable. And the latency is only going to be a couple, probably about 50 milliseconds or so, because it's going to be SRT, which is point-to-point connection, and you'll be able to crank down that latency very low, assuming you're in the same, geographical area.
Now, kind of piggybacking on that a little bit, if people have the quad right now will handle 4K. And the bandwidth for full NDI, because they're not HX capable yet, if you have a quad and you're doing 4Ks, that's why you need the SFP, because that's not going to fit on a single gigabit Ethernet. But if HX comes and somebody's doing 1080p over HX, 4 of them, there's going to be way more than enough bandwidth, so you don't even need the fiber anymore. You could just use a regular gigabit Ethernet, and you're still going to have a whole lot of headroom too.
Yeah, so on the Quadro G4, it'll be able, right now we're scoping it to do the 4 channels of 1080p at HX. I will say, and we'll have confirmation coming, in terms of the 4K on the channel, and this is something that we'll have kind of pretty forefront on it. But if you're trying to do a 4K HX signal on the Quad or OG4, we're not going to be able to hit 4 channels of that, and that's unfortunately, it's a physical limitation of the chip. But you will be able to do 10 or 4 1080 signals, and then it's going to kind of scale up. So as you go into the 4K world, you're going to get like 2 signals. Or 3 signals, maybe, depending on what we do with bandwidth testing. So it is going to be kind of a scaling thing that happens, but we're still looking at doing flexibility of options of having like high bandwidth and HX at the same time. So we're still navigating that path, which is one of the reasons why it's not available yet, is because there's a lot more considerations and complications that go into Quad and OG4. But yeah, 4 channels of HX is going to be, if you do HX3, I think certified is like 60 megs, something like that, 50 megs. So you're looking at 200 megabits. Don't want to say that wrong again. 50 per channel. So like 200 total is what you're going to be looking at, as opposed to previously it was for HD, it was like 120 to 140. And then 4K would be like 250. So yeah, whenever you're doing 4 channels of 4K 60, you definitely want to go to that SFP plus 10 gig option,
because it ain't gonna work otherwise.
You're gonna hit over, unless you're doing like very basic content like still images or like very, not complex frames, you might get away with it. But if you're doing any type of like video production or video content, yeah, you're not gonna make it. You're gonna need to go to that SFP plus.
Now, the full bandwidth, is that adjustable on the 4K, on the Quad, I should say?
Yeah, so we have basically auto bandwidth, which is the one that we recommend, because as I just kind of said, depending on the video complexity, that's what determines the bit rate of your NDI stream. So as we know, if we're filming a live sporting event, we might have, a nice wide establishing shot, and if we're looking at trees, that's actually going to be like pretty complicated. Shooting foliage is actually like one of the most complex things. So if you're shooting at trees or moving, that's going to be high. And what trips up a lot of people, and I'll say this from experience, is they'll go into their live stream, they'll set everything up, and then they'll go to like some video loop or slate, and it'll say, show's about to begin. And they're like, cool, everything's looking good, the video's looking smooth. And as soon as they flip that video slate to the camera image, that bandwidth is going to spike, because all of a sudden it's switching towards the live image. And so I used to have things where we drop a slate and the stream would like stop for like a couple seconds. And so with NDI, it's kind of the same thing. If you're shooting something complex, maybe you're looking at, a still wall or for white balance or something, and then you flip back over and there's like 100 people in your shot. The bandwidth you're going to see that bandwidth spike. And so that's what leads to like frame drops, to increase latency. So you do need to be conscious of what you're shooting when you're planning how much bandwidth you're going to use.
Yeah, and I tell people, like, people ask, what's the best bit rate I should set for my stream? I'm like, what are you streaming? Because if it's a talking head like my show, 4 megabits is fine. If you're doing water sports with sunlight glinting off the water, 4 megabits is not going to be anywhere near enough.
Yeah, and you can, and I didn't really complete the thought, I guess, so thanks for bringing that back. You can cap the bit rate that the Quad sets to, and I think 80 megabits is the lowest we allow you to do it. So you can set each channel to be 80 megabits, where basically think of it as you're setting the ceiling for it. And so as that video goes, it's going to hit that ceiling and not be able to basically go beyond that. And you're going to see basically pixelation or image degradation is what you'll see. So all of a sudden it might get blurry, and you might look and what's going on. So that's why we don't recommend it. But if you are in a weird environment where you're like, hey, this is all I got, you do have that resort. But generally, if you want to keep the image stable quality wise, you're going to want to go to that auto mode for bandwidth.
I think that is excellent advice. And then Golden TV chimes in on your level B. SMPTE introduced dual link level B, but Blackmagic exclusively adopted it, and it was a pain in the beginning. Yeah.
Yep.
And I know a lot of people always seem to be fighting this let in and out. So yeah.
Yeah, level B is fun. And one of the even worse things is like in their ATEM switchers, it's a big thing where you can set the mode and like the master settings to level A or B, which if you're doing with other cameras, more than half the time you're going to have to. The other thing is those mini converters that they sell, even the $100 ones, will have software that you need to load up and then switch it, because by default it's level B. So I've had a lot of customers that I've chatted with, which they'll get our quads or our 4K SDIs, and they'll go into those trying to get into the ATEM, telling me, hey, your unit doesn't work. And then find out that little, like if they're using the the ATEM HDMI, the little mini guy with HDMI, they were trying to use those mini converters with the quad. Find out that the mini converters have a software that you need to go into and change it to level A. As soon as they change it to level A, then the video goes through and everything's fine. So even those little mini converters can be level B by default, which basically blocks the signal.
And that is where we are today.
It's gotten a lot better for sure. As Golden T said, yeah, I'm sure back several years ago, it was a big time nightmare when people were figuring it out. Luckily, there's a lot of documentation now, but it's still not a forefront thing mentioned. So it still trips people up to this day.
Yeah, and there's always new people coming into the business and they don't know, like SDI is SDI, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, how can it be different?
And I feel like that's literally the saying that they say as well, you know, or I get like the back in my day, you know, it's just coax. It's all the same. Right. But yeah, with that level B, it did change and things weren't the same.
All right. Any more converters we need to cover?
So that's most of what we've been developing on right now. The flexes, they're kind of at their end of life, which we'll be having some news on that soon for that. So supply wise, the flexes, we're kind of turning the page, but we'll have public information on that, I think at the end of this week coming out. But yeah, the 4K Pro family, the Play, that's kind of where we're focusing most of our attention, because we still haven't really hit the ceiling on what they can do. So that's kind of where most of our focus, as well as next generation products we're working on as well. But we'll obviously talk about those more when they're closer to launch. But yeah, that's what we've been focusing on in the world of converters.
All right. Well, I thank you very much for being here and giving us all your expertise, handling all these really good questions. And you know, some of which actually are like, we enforced 1080 mode. That's a pretty good idea.
No, I appreciate all the questions for all those watching and people. I know several of the names. I've talked to you guys over email or Facebook. So don't hesitate to reach out to me. You know where to find me. But yeah, thank you guys so much for all the questions and watching.
All right. And I will look forward to the next show I get to do with you as well.
So awesome. Thanks, Anthony.
Now, just one last chance to come down here, and anyone who's watching the show live can register to win a 1-year BirdDog Connect subscription. I was going to leave this up here for a few seconds. We have 8 entries, and I'm looking at the live entry form right now. So you have a 1 in 8 chance of winning a 1-year BirdDog Connect subscription, which of course varies in price around the world. So I'm not going to throw a price out there, but it is definitely worth something good. So I'm going to throw that up there and give this a few more seconds and see if we missed anything in the comments. I think we covered most of the hard-hitting questions. And again, I thank you all for being here. We've got a couple more lined up in this series. Today was talking about converting, but we've got a couple more lined up in this series. So I'm looking forward to giving these shows out there onto the internet. Let's come down here. All right, let me share my screen. Now, these are the entrants for today. Richard, Julian, Fatah, Ali, Ralph, Corey, and Wilton. Thank you much for entering. I am going to copy your names right here. I am going to go into the wheel of names for the BirdDog contest. I'm going to paste your names in here, and then I'm going to click to spin the button. And the rest happens out of my hands, out of my control. And wow, Julian, it looks like you are indeed the winner. Yay! Now you can't hear it. I don't get the sound effects from the website, but there's a whole bunch of applause and fireworks and things like that. So thank you very much, Julian. I will forward your information over to BirdDog so that you can get your copy of the BirdDog Connect. I'm still calling it cloud. And thank you all for being here for the BirdDog live session number 10. I read somewhere on LinkedIn that most podcasts and live shows don't get past 9 shows. And we've made it to 10. And I look forward to keeping this going, and getting you more great information. So until next time, I'm going to say that's all, folks.